I've been seeing a bunch of battery desulfation videos or people putting up videos about their experiences with desulfation device or something. And I've never seen all that many videos about people's own experiences with going through a desulfation process. So I thought I'd put in my own 2 cents with regards to how well desulfation worked for me and put out a video with a whole bunch of notes I've collected from various videos and forum posts from people's own individual experiences. Now, just to be clear, I'm not an electrician. I'm not a car expert. This is just my experience with putting a desulfator on a battery and getting the notes on how the desulfation process worked. Now, before I begin, I'll put out some notes in regards to what I did and didn't find out about what is going on with a number of these ideas that people have had about how best to get a battery revived, as well as the conditions under which a battery can sulfate. Now, one of the processes that is going around on the internet is the usage of Epsom salts to help revive a battery. At least one video indicated that Epsom salt doesn't help revive a battery. All it does is when you put Epsom salt inside the cell compartments, it adds more ions to the acid water solution to counter the buildup of, well, basically the resistance in the cell due to sulfate buildup. So it in essence creates a false voltage reading. So you may think that you're recharging it back up to full strength. In reality, you're just, for all intents and purposes, adding to the problem that your battery is currently dealing with sulfation. Now, as far as how long a battery is going to last, I know that for some people, they said that a battery will last 5 or 6 years. Others say it should last 10 years. My answer to that is the length of time it lasts depends on the environment it's in. Now, obviously, there's people who live up north who have problems with car being able to turn over during cold weather. Not being up there, I'm not going to try to give any inputs about how they fare with their own batteries. But being in the state of Texas, I can assure you that we have our own problems. According to information I found online, lead acid batteries, they work best when the temperature is around 75 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit, or around 26 degrees Celsius. And this is because that's sort of like the ideal temperature under which a battery should be, the maximum temperature, ideal temperature for a battery year-round. And being in the state of Texas, we have summers where the temperature can reach 90 or 100 degrees Fahrenheit for 3 to 4 months at a time. That's 37 degrees Celsius, for anyone who's wondering. So pretty hot. As such, you're probably going to be lucky if your battery lasts 5 to 6 years without going through a desulfation process. And that's 5 to 6 years if you keep on refilling it with liquids. Speaking of, one of the situations that Texans deal with is the fact that an open cell battery can have the water evaporate over time due to the fact that the heat will cause the water to evaporate. I've heard stories from our mechanic about how they'll have cars come in because the battery just dies on someone, so the most a mechanic can do is just swap out the battery with a newer one and have the customer be on the way. But if you're interested in maintaining that battery, there is, basically you can use, what was it called? Distilled water. Any distilled water from grocery store, like at Walmart, they have distilled water for, was it $1, $1.50, and that's for a 1 gallon container. And depending on how many batteries you have, that can last you the life of the battery. Now, ideally, you want to like put it into the battery in a certain way. Like if you have a, you want to get like a baster thing that's like sort of like a glass cylinder with a bulb at the end. So that way, you can suck up a little bit of distilled water and then put it in the cell. Um, Basically, you want to have a controlled pour going into the cell because you don't want the cell to get topped off with water. There's like a certain level at which you want to fill the battery with distilled water so that way it doesn't get so depleted that the cells are exposed due to evaporated liquids, which the exposed cell is pretty much destroyed because it's going to be shorted out. Um, that would be the main thing. I mean, you're basically fighting the elements in a hot climate. Um, you have to like add distilled water to your battery if you want to like try to keep it running during the summer. Otherwise, you're going to be getting a new one every 5 or 6 years. So, with that in mind, I'll get to how my desulfation process went. Now, before I continue, I just want to let you know the desulfator I used. This is basically it. It's a vector battery charger, a smart charger with a desulfator option. However, I'm pretty sure this is generic because a quick Google search for this desulfator also brought up this Black & Decker smart charger, and taking a quick look at this button right here, this is where it says battery voltage right underneath it. Well, let me see if I can zoom in close enough. It said push, hold for, let's see, alternate, no wait, it was, oh yeah, here it is. Battery reconditioning, desulfation. And I'm pretty sure that that's what this button is right here. So every reason to believe that these desulfator models pretty much come from the same factory, and depending on which brand name gets slapped on it, determines, I would imagine, the value of it. And in particular, with this model, there's a list of indicators that say the condition of the battery. Now, what we want to look at is this. If for a sulfated battery or room with an open hole, it will say F03. If there's nothing wrong with it, I'm pretty sure that it just defaults to 000 because that indicates there's no fault code to indicate condition with the battery, and as such it just defaults to 000 to indicate that it is ready for the next process. So should you be in the process of sulfating your battery, the important thing is if it says F03 or 000, or there's something else that goes on, which when I get to that point, I will indicate further information about it. So, at the start of my process, the battery was showing, what was it? I'm not sure exactly what the battery was showing at the time, but I do know that the battery would not turn over. So that meant that it was drained enough that the voltage was not high enough for it to allow the car to turn over. So, I get the desulfation device out, hook it up to the battery, and start desulfating the battery. First day after desulfation, it shows 10.5 volts. So I'd make a note of it, so that way I would see what the progress was of the battery as it's desulfating. And the desulfation process, when it gets started, it takes 24 hours for one cycle of desulfation, so you're going to be sitting there for a while. The next day, after the first 24 hours, it showed 11 volts. I think I checked this. It was I either checked this with a voltmeter or checked it with the voltmeter built into the desulfator. Um, then after another 24 hours of desulfation, it's at 11.4 volts. So technically, this means just within the first 2 days, the desulfation process has managed to remove enough sulfation that it gets up to 11.4 volts um, voltage. So we're getting some progress. Now, over the next couple of days, not really seeing too much more progress going on. Not sure why, other than the possibility that the desulfation removed the sulfate on the top of the cell, but it hadn't gotten its way down into the sides of the cells. And as such, it was only making so much progress over the first couple days. Now, at this point, I'm just thinking if there was nothing improving about the battery the first 5 days, and just like, okay, this isn't worth the process. But having this much of a increase in voltage usage over 2 days, I was encouraged to allow this thing to go up for like another week or two to see how far it would get. And it was at, let's see here, this would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. After the sixth process, well, up until now, it was showing a F03 at the end of every session. So that would indicate that there was a sulfation issue continuing on. But at the end of this sulfation, it showed 000 to indicate standby mode. So that seemed to mean that enough sulfation had been removed from the cells to show that the battery was improving, because it was showing that instead of an F03. Or at least that's why I assumed what was going on. So I continue the desulfation process in the week 2. And at the end of the Sunday to Monday desulfation process, I'm getting 11.5 to 11.6 volts. Still shows a 000 instead of F03. However, let's see here. However, it shows F03 when... Oh, yeah, that's right. I remember that day I decided to try charging the battery, and instead of being able to do anything, it showed a F03 error code. So I think it was like I did one more desulfation process after this, because if it was showing 3 zeros, that seemed to indicate that it was highly improving. And at the end of this one, with it continuing to show 3 zeros instead of an F03, that's when I attempted a charge process, of which that didn't end that well. And so going this week, I finished it out on 11 days from the start of desulfation. It's around 5 or 6 p.m. on Friday. At the end of it, the battery was showing 12.8 volts with a multimeter. Now, I don't know if it was like the handheld multimeter I had, or I used the multimeter on the desulfator. However, something inside me was like, we probably want to like let the battery sit for a while and see if the battery maintains the 12.8 volt charge or if it goes down. I'm not sure how long I waited, but eventually the battery voltage fell at around 11.3 volts. Now, I wouldn't say that's good, considering the fact that it seemed to indicate that it was fully desulfated, but at the same time, at least that's higher than the 10.5 volts that I was originally reading from the very start of the desulfation process. So it's an improvement one way or the other. Now, at this point, let's see, it's 11 days in, so that indicates I was getting towards the end of the second week of desulfation. So I was just like, okay, it's improving, but we're not seeing a huge leap of improvement immediately. So we just need to let it sit and do its desulfation for another 2 weeks. So we come up to week 4. This would be day 26 of the desulfation process. After that's done, I check to see what the battery voltage is, and it's showing 10.8 to 10.9 volts. Indicator initially showed 000 before going to an F03. So I do it again on day 27, and instead of showing 10.8 to 10.9 volts, it's showing 10.3 volts. So for some reason, the number was going down. Wasn't sure why. Do one more desulfation on day 28. And at this point, it's showing 9 to 10 volts. Now, I'm not sure why that is. For some reason, it's just giving me a weird reading, and I can't really explain it. So I go online to see if I could find some information about what's going on with the desulfation process. And I found a little bit of a note online. Let's see here. It was, let's see. Basically, this is an individual that posted their own experience with a, let's see, battery lifesaver desulfator. I'm not sure what brand that is, but it's their own desulfator. Let's see here. Okay. The battery will now hold at 12 to 13 volts unless I leave the desulfator on, then the voltage will drop over a 2-week period to 10 volts. So that seemed to tell me the battery can hold at around the maximum voltage that it was originally manufactured for, but if it's left on a desulfator, something in the battery is indicating that the voltage is lower than what it actually is. At this point, I'm not sure why that is that's doing that. But that gives me some encouragement with the idea that I just need to let the battery sit to see if it increases in voltage after a period of time. Because, like, for all intents and purposes, up here, let's see, it was showing 12.8 volts with a multimeter. But after I waited a few hours, it went down to 11.3 volts. So if it's showing 9 to 10 volts after this desulfation process, let's wait 30 to 40 minutes to see if it goes back up. So after I wait 30 to 40 minutes, I check the voltage, and it's showing 12.8 volts. Now, this is the same reading I was reading up here. At this point, for all intents and purposes, it's a false reading. I don't know. But the fact that it went up from the end of this desulfation process being at 9 to 10 volts, and after waiting 30 to 40 minutes, it goes up to 12.8 volts, I find that promising. So I decide to put it inside my Camry to see if the battery will actually turn the car over. Now, this is where, as I'm trying to work on the car, I end up losing the socket I was using to tighten the bolts that would hold the battery in place. So I calculate that the battery is sitting for another 30 to 40 minutes as I'm working on trying to get the car prepped to install the battery. Eventually I get the battery installed. I turn the car over, and the engine starts up just fine. I decide to turn it off and turn it back on again, because it's usually there's enough juice in the battery to do one turnover, and then you've used up that juice, and it's not going to turn over again. So I turn it off, turn it back on again, and it's able to start up perfectly fine. Now I got nothing else plugged in to the battery. It's the car running off of whatever juice is in the battery at the time. So it turns over by itself with just the power of the battery hooked into the car. Now, while the car is running, I decide to get a multimeter out to check across the battery to see what the voltage level is. And this is when I find out that it's reading 14 volts across the battery. This means that the alternator was working, and so whatever the problem was with the battery itself. So I decide to have a trickle charger hook up to the battery overnight, with the possibility that it could increase in voltage over time. Because like the desulfator whatever it was doing to like show a low reading before and then suddenly goes back up. I figured a trickle charger that outputs was uh, barely an amp of power to the battery so that it slowly brings it up to full power, while at the same time doesn't get too much power out to the battery so as to do something weird with the battery or whatever. I check it that next day, and the battery was reading 13.1 volts. And that's while I was connected to the car. I basically unplugged it from the trickle charger. I'm pretty sure I unplugged it from the trickle charger. Uh, Hooked up a multimeter to the battery, and it's showing 13.1 volts. Turn it over twice, connected to the car, and the car turns over both times. Now, at this point, I suppose there's like, I could keep on checking it once a day to see whether or not the car continues to turn over. But at this point, with it having been a full 24 hours from the last desulfation process to when I have it installed in the car, and hooked up to a trickle charger so that it can like go back up to whatever the maximum voltage it can be at. To me, trying to keep on testing out to make sure it runs every day is just a waste of gasoline. So at this point, I'll just regularly use it to see how well it does over a period of time. And at this point, it's just like, if it's showing 13.1 volts, which is probably the highest voltage it's been at since it was manufactured, then I would take that as, especially considering the fact that the car turned over both times under the battery's power alone, that this means that the battery was restored back to its maximum voltage. Which means sometime between week 2 and week 4 is when I would imagine the sulfate had been completely removed from the battery and it was ready to be used again. Now, I don't know at what point that was, because like I stopped checking it after 2 weeks, just let it do its thing over a 4-week period of time, and just having to because like with the desulfation device, I had to like restart the desulfation process once every 24 hours because it stops after 24 hours. So, but yeah, at this point, if anything, this should give you a good indication of the fact that just because the battery is showing weird readings immediately after desulfation does not necessarily mean that the battery still needs to be desulfated. I would say within the first 2 weeks of the desulfation process, don't expect any progress whatsoever. Once you get past week 2, that's when you can start considering checking your battery with a multimeter every day after the end of the process. We'll get done with the process, wait 30 to 40 minutes, check with a voltmeter or multimeter, and whatever it is after you've waited a period of time after desulfation, that's probably going to be what the actual voltage is of the battery in that moment. And if it gets to where it manages to get up to 12.5 or 12.6 volts, you've probably gotten it back to where it's been completely desulfated. Now, at this point, I can't say that this process will work for everyone, depending on how bad of a condition your battery is in. But I can at least say that for what I did and my dedication to getting it desulfated, this worked. The battery, which dates back to 2016, when, for all intents and purposes, that's when it was last at 13.1 volts of power, is now back to the 13.1 volts level that it was probably when it was first taken off the assembly line. Now, the battery, in case you're wondering, I believe is a Duralast. So, and I believe that AutoZone is the one that sells Duralast. So that should give you a good indication that Even a store brand battery like oh gee, what was the 'cause Costco does interstate. Walmart, what does Walmart do? Walmart car battery. Let's see. Walmart. Yeah, that's Walmart does EverStart and AutoZone. AutoZone does. Let's see if it'll load up quick enough. uh, uh, AutoZone does Duralast. So, for all intents and purposes, assuming that a Duralast battery is no better than an EverStart from Walmart, especially taking into consideration that all car batteries are basically manufactured from one of three factories, then this process can easily revive even a cheap store brand car battery. I'll leave it at that. Again, your mileage is going to vary depending on the condition of your battery at the time, but if you want to take the effort into trying to get your battery back into working condition, if it gets down to like, 10, 11 volts, which is like what this got down to, 10.5 volts, desulfation is capable of reviving a battery that is that low. And by the fact that the car turned over means that there was enough power to, what was it, cold cranking amps, I think it is. Let's see here. Battery CCA. Is that what the value is? Let's see here. Oh yeah, cold cranking amps. It's basically the amount of cold cranking amps necessary for it to start a car given the amount of cold cranking amps a particular car needs to turn over. So that meant that the battery was at full charge and it had enough cold cranking amps to function again. And that's what's important. And of course, this also gets down to how much money you want to put into a desulfation device. I mean, if this is down to you only have one car and one battery and you just want it working when you need it, well, obviously there's the flip side, which is you need it to be replaced as soon as possible so that you can keep on going to work. Otherwise, if you're the type to, I guess for all intents and purposes, swap out a battery should something go wrong with the primary battery that you have, and you'll have a backup battery in your household somewhere, then I suppose this is something that you could use, because this is down to how much time and effort you have to put into reviving a battery if you have a whole bunch of batteries put aside for whatever reason, and you just want to see if you can recover them without throwing them out. Well, hopefully this is enough notes for you guys. I provide some links, but at this point these are all my personal notes, so I'll leave. Feel free to donate. If I got a Ko-Fi link and a Bitcoin address. Good luck to whoever wants to try to desulfate their battery, and I'll see you guys next video.